Hello world! If you recall in our last video, we told you the pharaohs dug the Osiris shaft tunnels from Aswan down to Giza. However, what we didn't mention is that Herodotus wrote that these tunnels extend all the way to the Mediterranean Sea, which is why we extended our clear tube to this bucket labeled Mediterranean Sea.
In this video, we'll show you how the pharaohs filled Lake Moeris using the Osiris shafts without putting head pressure on the Sphinx.
For the renovations, the pharaohs would have needed to gain access to these Osiris shafts. However, at this point, they were completely filled with water, so they drained their tunnel into the Mediterranean. I will open this ball valve to allow water to flow into our bucket to simulate them doing this.
Next, they separated the two Osiris shaft systems. They did this by placing a block in the tunnel just behind the Sphinx. Doing this would separate the Lake Moeris to Giza pipeline we learned about in episode 1 from the Aswan to Giza pipeline we learned about in episode 2. As you can see from this diagram, the pharaohs did in fact place a block in this exact location.
They then built a wall in front of the Sphinx and dead-ended a causeway into the wall. Since the hillside behind the Sphinx was high, the hillside, causeway, and wall created a pool. We are representing this pool with these clear buckets. Here is an actual picture of the area we took about a year ago when we were in Egypt. Notice the wall and causeway connect on the south side of the Sphinx. This is what we are recreating on our board.
Now look at this diagram. There's a stairway leading into a trough below the front of the Sphinx. This trough was dug to the exact same elevation as the Osiris shaft under the Sphinx. We believe this shaft extends to Lake Moeris. Today, this trough has been filled in with sand. Unfortunately, no diagram exists showing the wall in relation to the trough, so we can't determine if the trough is part of the pool or not.
If it is part of the pool, it means they dug it to expose the tunnel so water would flow directly into the Osiris shaft as it filled the pool. If not, water would enter the Osiris shaft through the holes in the Sphinx. Either way, their system would function the exact same. However, using the trough would minimize erosion to the holes of the Sphinx.
We decided to incorporate the trough, so we plumbed these two buckets together, creating this odd shape. We liked the idea of minimizing damage to the Sphinx. Next, they would need to fill their newly created pool with water. To do this, they dug massive holes starting along this causeway, reaching down to the lowest level of the Osiris shafts.
We are using this clear tube to represent one of these holes, and this clear tube to represent the causeway.
Here's a picture we took of one of these massive holes. There are approximately a half a dozen of them. They are about 12 foot square. The only place you can find them is next to this causeway. Now that all of this was created, they could replace their block plugging the Osiris shaft near the Mediterranean Sea.
Now, to simulate the flood season starting 500 miles upriver, my dad will let the floodwaters flow into our Osiris shafts.
Watch as the non-toxic dyed water flows through the system. Remember, water can no longer flow under the Sphinx due to the blocks separating the two systems.
Because of this, as water reaches Giza, it rises up these massive holes and begins flowing down the causeway. At this point, men could stand in the causeway and collect as many fish as they could.
This water then fills the pool surrounding the Sphinx. As the elevation of the water rises above the elevation of the water in Lake Moeris, it reverses course, flowing back into the lake, just as Herodotus described. The elevation of Lake Moeris is rising. I will now reduce the water in our Nile, simulating the drought season.
Notice how after he does this, water will stop entering the Osiris shafts. Because they anticipated this, the pharaohs placed a removable block at the bottom of this wall, we represented with this ball valve. To continue receiving fish during the drought season, all they had to do was remove that block and allow water and fish from Lake Moeris to reverse course and pour out onto the Giza Plateau.
This open pipe here represents another smaller causeway below the Sphinx, which enabled the water to travel back to the Nile. Just like the upper causeway, men could stand in it as the water flowed by and collect as many fish as possible.
Stay tuned for our next video where we explain the purpose of the Great Pyramid.
Thank you.